Bradshaw, say hi.
Hello. I'm going to go close the door. I have people over at my house.
Oh, that's why. So you're not tired from working.
I'm famous. That's why.
Oh, okay. So welcome everyone. We are going live today to talk about teaching yoga to beginners. But I'm getting an alert on my phone. So I think this is a really interesting topic. I actually started my teacher or my teaching journey teaching to beginners. What about you, Bradshaw? Did you have a lot of experience with this or?
No, the majority of people that used to come to my class were very like fitness oriented kind of.
And they weren't beginners.
They were not beginners. No, I would say like be like in between intermediate and beginners.
Was the first place you taught C.A.C.?
Bare feet.
Okay. Yeah, and there's like a little bit of like a fitness vibe to both these
Totally.
places, C.A.C. and yeah.
Yeah.
I taught at a studio, but I also taught in an area that just had a lot of seniors. And so a lot of them were just coming to yoga for the first time, but they were also just not as agile, I guess I could say that. And I would have to start from the very, very beginning. So I think we should just give we should name some differences teaching to beginners versus like a well-balanced class or an advanced class. And then I think we can give some tips.
Totally.
So are there any
I
obvious differences that stand out to you between teaching beginner classes versus?
One main thing. It's so much easier to teach advanced students.
That's true.
It is. They know what you're doing, right? So you're
Yeah.
just there. It's much it's more of a joy to teach beginners, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it is the easiest to teach people who are advanced because they know the skill. They know the in and outs of like the modality. So I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to teach a class like that.
Megan's an advanced student.
But
I'm not. I can't hear you, Bradshaw. You cut off. What did you say?
I said Megan is the most advanced student out of anyone I know.
Oh wow, that's a high praise.
No, I'm just
Um, something that I think that's important to, in my mind, of differentiating, and you kind of just
Tito,
touched
relax.
on this, is that when you teach to beginners,
Hmm.
you need to provide a little bit more context because instead of just like saying the pose as you might in the middle of a flow, you have to set it up.
On the table.
And it's a really fine balance between saying too much where it becomes overwhelming and then just enough so that they understand where their body is moving in space and how this sort of generally looks.
I think
So,
that like simplicity is power. For beginning yoga students is like keep it simple, keep it grounded, keep it relevant, and like when they come back to do that same thing over and over again.
yeah, I think your sequence and the cues should be really clear and simple, and the poses can be more introductory. But I don't think this means that it's easier. I think I just wanted to say that, like, just because it might be a beginner's class, I sometimes think it's actually harder to teach and harder to take. You might be holding, your warriors for like 5 breaths minimum just to like really feel that alignment rather than a fast paced vinyasa class where you're like you rise and you're already in a chaturanga. So I don't
Don't
know.
you
I
all?
think yeah.
I, Sorry, this is just something I've been thinking about a lot recently. There aren't as many beginners classes. Like people
I
want to go
know.
and right away, and I think I think that that's a disservice to them as practitioners and like
Mm-hmm.
kind of a disservice to the yoga industry is like learn
Mm-hmm.
the basics, learn them well, and then move on. I like wish more people would do that.
I agree. I've always seen like beginners classes in a series, which I think it's a really nice way to have like an intro. It could be like a 6 class series or a month-long thing, however you want to do it. And I love when studios do that because then you have like a cohort for that entire time that you're like learning with. And then you get to know instead of a drop-in, you get to like really know and like see the progression when you have that sort of beginner series. Yeah, so let's lay out a couple of tips, and this will be a shorter live today, but we're going to give some tips that we found that work when teaching to beginners. So I think number one, we can say keep it simple and clear. And simple can mean indirect cueing and also just the poses you're choosing to sequence.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, please.
Like, let the sequence also be very, I don't like the word, I'm trying to think of a better word than simple.
Do you think simple has a negative connotation?
I do, unfortunately. I like, I wish
Mm.
it didn't. I think that simple and basic,
Yeah.
like, I think easy. Like you were
Mm-hmm.
saying before, like, I don't think that simple or basic is actually easy. I think it's more fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe like yoga fundamentals would be a good name for a
Yeah,
series. Should we do one?
there's a class of fundamentals, which I really liked. Because
Mm,
it's
okay.
you're learning, like, it doesn't mean it's, I actually think, like you were saying, like a basics class or a beginner's class, as it usually is called, can
Yeah.
be very intricate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Now you've got
It
me
is
thinking.
interesting. Well, you were gonna add something on. You said you didn't finish adding on though. I was talking about, or okay, so I said keep cues clear, simple, or I
Oh,
know you.
oh, and like something that we do in our 200-hour training and also our teacher development is like consistency, and like this
Mhm,
is really where the consistency is the most important. Do the same thing over and over again, so they learn the basics. They
mhm,
learn well. They learn the basics without being overwhelmed, and they
mhm.
can get into doing classes that are a little bit more, I hate the word advanced. We need to like find a whole different like language system for it, but a
Okay.
little
Well,
bit.
we're gonna work on our language around this, but
Yeah.
we get the point. So
Thank you. Thank you.
we get the
Yeah.
point.
We get the point. Moving on.
Well, I just want to like really lay this stuff out. I think this next point that I'm going to make that is really tied to it is just like setting up the pose. I think that's really important when teaching to beginners because you can't just say like inhale warrior one. Like it's very important to cue the setup for poses in beginners classes. Are you nervous?
I'm just finding my nails. You know I have my nails.
It's okay. I won't yell at you.
Thank you.
Do you agree with that? Like you need to cue the setup for every pose.
Yes. Yes. I think that there's like, there's no need to rush.
Mm-hmm.
No need to rush. Like, take your time, set up the pose. Think of, I would say, like, actually, before the class, know the poses that you're teaching, and then have like 5 really great, specific, easy to understand cues for those poses.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And like,
And
also use language that is easy to understand for people that are just coming into a yoga room. Like, I even talked to my brother and he's taken anatomy courses, and I'm like, you know, your scapula protracts or retracts. He's like, why are you saying scapula?
what
You
did he like? Shoulder blades? Because I think
know,
I say scapula. Okay,
yeah,
true.
you know, like, it's so funny to hear that. I'm like, you know what your scapula is, but it's like, Brad, most people don't. And I didn't know what my scapula was before I started teaching yoga. Is like keeping things
Mm.
just, I don't want to say like layman's terms. We need to find a whole different language for what we're trying to say. But not like layman,
That'll be next week.
but like, yeah, right, exactly. Um, Broader language.
I like this. This is how I'm gonna say it. I think you need to avoid yoga jargon, and this also includes like technical anatomy jargon.
Mhm.
But I think if you just start saying things like bring your hands to Anjali Mudra from the very beginning, they're gonna be like, there's
People
just
are gonna
so, yeah, there's just like so many layers to yoga that you catch on the more you practice, from
100%.
the poses to the Sanskrit to the alignment, the anatomy, and so on and so on. So I
I
think,
There's nothing wrong with saying like open up to Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2.
yeah, I think that's good. I think it's good to have both to start making that connection. But I would,
Also, sorry, I just want to add on to that. Also, so like
yeah.
people don't feel like I don't know what that is. Like
But
it's
what
like
I think, but what I think you shouldn't do is be like, Virabhadrasana, this means friendly warrior. Like, I don't think you should like define and like get too jargony about it just because you want to like tell them everything you know. So you definitely need to like edit. There's going to be an editing curve of like what's the most important things to know without going overboard.
totally.
Because we don't want to overwhelm them. So if we could like say I'm gonna just like keep rehashing our points. Be clear, keep it basic sequencing. I think you need to set up every pose. We didn't mention this, but it kind of goes along with this. And then you need to make your transitions really like simple, like uncomplicated transitions between poses.
Huge. Yeah.
Like this is not going to be the time where we're like one-legged chaturanga to the back of the room or whatever. Like we're gonna do.
And then also like teaching that very simple sequence for 4 weeks.
So repetition is key for any student just to retain information.
I'm just
Another
building
one
my
that I
basic.
think, another point that I think is really, really important when teaching to beginners is to remind them of the breath. Because I remember my very first yoga classes, like I was like not actually breathing. Like it took me like, I don't know how long, but it took me months to
I
connect to the breathing
thought
pattern.
years for a lot of
Yeah.
people. Disconnected from their breath. I think people in like classes that are more physical also get
Mm-hmm.
disconnected.
Yeah. So that's high up there on the list of these teaching tips. And I think we could add on teaching to who's in the room. That's really important, especially if you do have like a series that you're doing and you get to know everyone. You can really tailor what you're doing to that specific group.
Can I add something else just from the like an experience that I had today? Like I
Yeah.
class, there were 5 people in this public class. Everyone was wearing masks. Don't worry, and they, I could tell were beginners.
Mm-hmm. Your audio cut out. Hold on. Your
Oh,
audio
sorry.
cut out when you
Am I
said you
back?
could tell they were beginners. Yeah,
Am I back?
go.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, so what I did is I took my sequence and I kind of took out a lot of the stuff that was really fast and not necessary. So I would just step
Mm-hmm.
them to down dog, not have them do a vinyasa. You know, it's like being able to kind of recognize the room where these people
Mm-hmm.
are at, and then teaching to the middleman, which we talk a lot of, in Kaya Yoga School. Like, you know, don't teach to the, you know, the person that's been practicing for 10 years or the person who just walked in the room. Teach to the center of the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's about knowing who's in the room. Like you literally have to look and tailor it to that. The last tip that I could think of, and then I'll let you, or maybe I could think of two more tips. If you have any, keep thinking of them. Um, I think in a beginner's class or in a beginner's series, you need to give. Are you there? I don't hear you. Your internet is being really bad. No, I don't hear you. I just still don't hear you. The rest of this chat is me like Bradshaw now. Then can you hear me? No, I don't hear you. But listen, while you figure out your audio, I'm going to say this next tip. I think you should find. No. Why does it keep cutting out? I think it's because you're like getting messages or something. Do you want to come in and out? Because we're about to wrap up, but I want you here. Okay. Bradshaw's internet is giving a lot of issues all the time, but we're still here. I've got two more hot tips that I'm about to lay out. Say
Sorry.
something. Yeah, I hear you now.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Were you able to hear me?
No, just said wrapping it up. All I heard was
We're
wrapping.
we're gonna wrap it up, but I have two more tips that I could think of, and if you have any, let's just say those. But another one that I think when you're in a beginner series that's really important is to know how to give corrections. And I don't even like the word corrections, but you've got, this is your time while they're absorbing and taking in new information to be really gentle with how you show any sort of feedback or correction. Um, what do you think?
I agree.
Okay. And then the last point that I can think of is that it's really important to take questions when you're teaching to beginners. So I always leave space for questions after class. Before class, I make sure I'm available. Tito's got lots of questions. Bradshaw is unruly today.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Tito, relax. My Tito hears one little thing in the hallway and goes nuts.
So you need to be there to answer questions. I'm feeling like missing out, but look, I gave Rosie a haircut today. I shaved her down myself.
She looks beautiful.
So do you have any other pointers or tips for teaching to beginners before we sign off?
No, I think my main point would be just like, Tito, just be prepared.
Be prepared.
Be
This goes beyond teaching to beginners. You should
no,
be prepared for anyone you're
talk
teaching
about this
ever.
all the time. Just like be prepared for what you're going to teach, and I think that like really resonates with beginners. Like, know
Mm-hmm.
what you're going to teach them. Like, know different options, know different ways of doing things, and like be supportive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a lot of people are insecure about starting yoga. That's like a big thing for me, actually. That's like probably the biggest.
I
Is like
agree.
be really supportive of the people who like took the time. They're like, I've never done this before. Like that can be really vulnerable. So just
Mm-hmm.
be there for them, be kind to them, and welcome them back.
You're reminding me of something that I think is important. We talked about how beginners classes are not as common on some studio schedules, and I noticed the other day there were beginners in my class because you know when there's beginners because they're looking around the room to see what things mean, and they're really trying to like find someone to be the example. And this was happening a lot. My sequence was sort of challenging, but the majority of the room was with it. It was just like these two people, I think it was their first or second time in yoga, taking a yoga class. And I went up to them after class and I made sure I told them that they did an awesome job. And I just started a conversation with them. I was like, you two are awesome. Like, I'm glad to, like, I asked their names. I'm like, I'm glad you're here. Like, I wanted to make them feel welcome because I saw them like struggling at moments. And then they told me, which I didn't know before, they're like, yeah, this was like our first, it was one of their first classes and the other one maybe just a handful of times. And they're like, he literally said to me, he's like, wait, were we really good? I was like, you did really good. I was like, this was a challenging class. Like, I made sure to let them know that this was like a hard sequence and that my sequences are not usually this challenging. And I told them, like, go to other teachers, like, keep trying other teachers. You're going to find your fit. Like, I think it's almost like finding a therapist. It's like you need to find someone that like you resonate with. So if it wasn't me, no hard feelings, but like don't base your judgments off of like a one drop-in class. Like I said this up front, and I think it made them feel more empowered and excited to like come back.
Another thing to consider, Gigi, is like it's sometimes exciting to go to classes and be like, I could get there, or like I could work on this. Not like it's something to aspire, like, oh, I need to grab on. Oh, but like there's so much to do. There's so much to explore. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
within a class. And so I think sometimes going to a challenging class like that, I know it can be overwhelming. I've been overwhelmed. I've gone to, classes where I'm like, oh, wow, these people are doing crazy stuff. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've also been like, this is really inspiring and humbling, and like the process is always unfolding. So
Yeah. Well, awesome. Let's recap our tips and then we're going to sign off. So, tip one for teaching to beginners, keep it simple, clear, concise cues. I'm going to call it 1B. Let your sequence be relatively uncomplicated and clear as well. 3, or this is actually 2. 2, set up the pose. You need to like literally lay out every single pose for someone who's never heard of it before. And then 3, keep your transitions uncomplicated.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm like trying to remember everything we just talked about. Be supportive. That's number 4. Like make sure you're showing encouragement and support and have a welcoming vibe to you, to the environment of the classroom. 5, I would avoid yoga jargon and also like technical anatomy stuff. 6, create space around it, take questions, leave time for that. 7, I think I said one more that I can't remember. Were you paying
no,
attention?
I think of course I was paying attention.
I think those were all the
I
tips, right? Did I reiterate in a clear order all of our major tips?
a couple, but that's okay.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
respect.
So the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And I encourage everyone, every teacher to teach to beginners because it'll show you so much more about your teaching
I,
skills.
can I add one more thing before we go? I
Yeah.
also like it's the most rewarding. Like just to see
Yeah.
people grow and like experience something new is so rewarding and beautiful. So that's it.
I agree. And you know what we both can relate on about that is teaching in a gym versus teaching in a studio. Teaching in a gym, you often have people who will happen upon your class who like won't
Yep.
necessarily
Gyms are where it's at.
they won't necessarily sign up for a yoga class or go to a yoga studio, but if it's with their membership and they're like, "Oh, I'll try this out." I found that it is rewarding. This is what made me think of it, you saying that, is because you get to be that person to introduce yoga to someone who might not have happened upon it on their own elsewhere. And so anytime I ever taught at a gym, I would remember this and I would like use it to like create more yoga practitioners. I'm like, okay, every class, this is my opportunity to, you never know who's in that room and they could be really big classes. So I think that's one of the best opportunities if you do like teaching to beginners to bring more beginners on board without them even knowing. So anytime I taught in a gym, I always taught with like a beginner's mindset.
That's good advice. And you're also really pretty. I love you.
Okay, love you too. Have fun. I will talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
I don't know how to leave.